What's up, losers? Today I'm back with some more r/fatlogic tomfoolery. Reading a couple of posts. And sharing whatever random thoughts I have about them. This is episode 83 in the fatlogic series. And I'm itching to see what the fat activists have been up to this time. So without further delay, let's get into it.
Rebellion is a natural result of tyranny. Diets are the tyrants. It's not your willpower, it's your body's natural defense.
Wow, these people really have a way of making themselves sound cool and badass, don't they? Like, they're definitely not just sitting around eating all day. Although it might look that way. No, what they're really doing is rebelling against the horrifying tyranny of diets. How brave. Kidding aside, yeah, this is pretty cringy, not gonna lie. The idea that dieting is tyrannical, in any way, is completely laughable. Nobody is forcing anyone to go on a diet. It's completely optional. The fact that other people are doing it, and receiving praise for their efforts, might make you feel resentful about not receiving the same positive attention. But this is far from tyranny. You can't just go through life putting in zero effort, expect other people to worship the ground you walk on, and cry tyranny when people turn out to be less than impressed by you. Because at no point in that process did anyone make any kind of imposition on you. It's simply a demonstration that actions have consequences, and so too does inaction. If you are unwilling to put in the same effort that others do, and you receive less social validation in return, that's not tyranny, it's just life. And as for the idea that overeating is the body's natural defense, rather than a failure of one's willpower, yeah, that doesn't really check out either. I have no interest in shaming fat people for their tendency to overindulge themselves, because I understand how tough it can be to ignore strong cravings. And because I don't think that it's productive to assign blame when we could be looking forward. But it's important to recognize that overeating is ultimately something that is within one's power to control. Regardless of how hungry you might feel in the moment, eating too much is eating too much, and it's bad for one's health. Instead of depriving fat people of their agency, let's recognize that they do, in fact, have a say in what becomes of their life. Because that seems a lot more empowering to me than this faux rebellion against an imagined tyranny.
4 things to say to a doctor who keeps pushing weight loss. What treatment would you provide for a thin person who has this issue? Please don't weigh me, unless it's medically necessary. I know we have limited time, so I'd like to focus on XYZ. I'd appreciate you asking questions about my habits and lifestyle, rather than making assumptions based on my weight.
Okay, so, to respond to these suggestions one by one. The first is just asinine. What point is there in asking the doctor what treatment he would give a thin person? If you yourself are not thin. Fat people and thin people are physically different. They have different medical risk factors, and different levels of suitability for various forms of treatment. The doctor knows this, and that is why they will, in some cases, offer different treatment plans to fat patients than they would to thin patients. It's a way of giving fat people the best treatment for them, not depriving them of a better alternative, and certainly not punishing them for being fat. So yeah, asking this question would be a colossal waste of both the doctor's and your time. Especially if you are determined to argue the point. As I suspect most fat activists would be. So I would cross it off the list. The second point is not quite as silly as the first, but it is a little confusing. Insofar as, while weighing a patient might not be strictly medically necessary, in the way that an emergency surgery or something might be, it's clearly medically motivated. Like, the doctor is not just weighing people for fun. It's useful information to have, for identifying causes and risk factors for a variety of conditions. If you don't want to step on the scale, for one reason or another. That's ultimately up to you. But the doctor wouldn't be suggesting it if they didn't think it was medically useful. So I would keep that in mind before refusing on the basis of some misguided sense of personal victimization. The third point about having limited time and wanting to focus on certain things isn't really fat specific, because anyone can have specific reasons for going to see a doctor and be anxious to see those concerns addressed first. Which is completely fair. I would add, though, that if your doctor is urgently trying to bring something to your attention, despite your efforts to shift the focus elsewhere, what they're talking about is probably pretty important, and you would be unwise to ignore it. And as for the fourth point, look, I understand wanting the doctor to ask questions rather than assume, but at a certain point it's probably safe for the doctor to make a couple of inferences. Especially if you're as concerned with the limited appointment time as you claim to be. If you're morbidly obese and not losing any weight, the doctor doesn't need to be told the story about how you actually exercise 15 hours a day and hardly eat, because they're, rightly, not going to believe it. And that will just be a frustrating and pointless detour. So, yeah, questions are cool, and all that. But if you're incapable of being honest with yourself, much less your doctor, a simple way in might be the way to go instead.
So freaking pissed off with the bloody handles on the underground trains in London. Okay, I know I'm big. And there are other big people. And we can barely fit in a seat. Especially if we have stuff in our pockets. Even if we can fit, doesn't mean that we are comfortable or able to get up without a challenge, because we have wedged ourselves into these seats. TFL, please make the handles movable again. Hashtag TFL, hashtag London Underground, hashtag we know you hate people, hashtag fatphobic, hashtag fatphobia, hashtag fatphobes.
Well, I probably shouldn't have included this post, because I don't really know what's going on in it. Like, what are the handles? Are those like armrests? I don't know. I also don't know how wide the seats actually are. So it's hard to comment on how restrictive the seats really are. And finally, I don't know what the reason might have been for changing the handles from how they were before. So all in all, I really know frick all, haha. I did want to share my thoughts regardless, though, because I have surprisingly mixed feelings about the issue. Like, on the one hand, I'm always flabbergasted by how, even when they find themselves in embarrassing situations like this, where they can't even sit down on public transport, fat activists still don't see their weight as the issue, and focus on the seats being too small instead. Because I'm pretty sure that if I were in their position, having an experience like that would be a real wake-up call. That my weight was getting out of hand, and something needed to be done. I mean, whatever changes might have been made to the seats, I'm sure that they're still not that small, and they must be big enough for the vast majority of riders. So if you're too big to fit in or get out of them, the problem must lie, at least to some extent, with you. But at the same time, surprisingly, I think they might have a bit of a point on this one. Because as much as I find the fat activist demands that all of society's infrastructure be rebuilt to better accommodate them unreasonable, by the sounds of things, in this case, the seats were accommodating enough to begin with. And whatever changes they've made have only made the situation worse. Which doesn't make much sense to me. Like, the number of fat people probably hasn't gone down. Why go out of your way to make things more difficult for the fat people who are already out there? I don't get it. Maybe this post is leaving out some important details. Or maybe I just have no idea what's going on. I don't know, and I'm not going to go out of my way to find out the answers. But as things stand, it does sound like the fat people of London might have gotten a raw deal on this one. Sorry about that, I guess. Well, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed checking these posts out with me, and hearing me ramble on about them, haha. What do you think? Is being fat, and refusing to diet, a rebellion against tyranny? Should fat people tell doctors how to do the job? Should public transport seating be adjustable to accommodate extremely fat people? Let me know in the comments. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe, or I'll make you sit down in a seat that's too tight for you. And you'll be unable to get out of it, and be trapped there forever. Just kidding, haha. Anyway, catch you later.